Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the January 18th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to those of you who are tuned in on Facebook Live. Shouts to those of you who are tuned in on YouTube Live. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Listen, my daughter's tuition is due on Wednesday. I know I'm a long ways away from monetizing on YouTube, but when you hit that subscribe, it's like you're investing in her future. I might even let you come to the graduation if they give me more than like 2 or 3 tickets. So you can, that's what you get if you hit subscribe. You get to come to my daughter's graduation, or better yet, I'll live stream it just like I'm doing right now. And last but not least, props to those of you who might be tuning in on IG, the stragglers, right? But go ahead, go on over to YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Definitely appreciate you. So today we're gonna have a dope conversation about Regina King's critically acclaimed film One Night in Miami. I put out some feelers to on social media to have some brothers, and brothers in particular, because and we're gonna get into it, but this idea of brotherhood that was exhibited within One Night in Miami. So I put out some feelers. Brothers responded. I'm always grateful to have for anybody who choose to take some time out, whether they playing hurt, like the good educator, the good brother Ality Farmer. As always, you've seen him here before. Definitely appreciate you coming through. We got the American Negro professional dancer. I think I got it backwards, but y'all know who it is. Zane. He's been on here for the last 4 weeks. As always, definitely appreciate you coming through. And then we got the good brother Dr. Love, not Dr. Buddy Love. Right, but this brother is an amazing person. He saw the post and he was like, "Yo, I'm down to participate." And I'm like, "I don't even know you, brother." Like like it was one of those type jokes where I'm looking like, "Yeah, I don't know him. Let me go see." And you automatically go to see who do we have in common as far as followers. And I'm like, "Oh, these some quality folk." I reached out. I was like, "Who, Doctor?" Oh, they say, "Oh yeah, if you could get him, if he's saying he wants to be a part of it, you have him there." So he's an amazing educator, educating at the Community College of Philadelphia. Is it Africana Studies? Good brother.
Yeah, it's black studies, the history department, but black studies. Yeah,
Black
Africana
Studies.
studies.
No doubt. So we got Dr. Anya Love. Definitely appreciate you coming through, good brother. So listen, we're gonna get this thing started, man, with One Night in Miami. I want you to give me your initial thoughts when you heard that this movie was going to be made. We understand that, if for those of you who've been under a rock, One Night in Miami is about one day back in 19, was it 64, 65? I believe was it 64? 1964, February 20,
64.
yeah, February 25th. It was right after Muhammad Ali knocked out Sonny Liston, which is, again, that's a there's some things about that. There's some skepticism some folk have. You could go to a boxing show to hear about that. But these four brothers, Sam Cooke, Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, then and Jim Brown. And it still is odd to say Jim Brown, given what we know about Jim Brown today, right? To know that he was a part of that conversation, and it was a more so a semi-fictional account of what took place that day when those four brothers met up. And again, Regina King did a phenomenal job. I'm not familiar who the writer is, but they also did a phenomenal job. So I wanted to get your brother's initial thoughts on on what you thought about the film prior to its release. So we'll start with you, Al Latif.
Well, first, thanks for having me come through tonight. I'm interested in seeing exactly where this conversation goes, and always down to to contribute. So this night is something that I've been intrigued by um, probably half my life. From whenever the first time I learned that the four of them were together after that fight, I always wanted to know what happened, what was the conversation, and I know Um, the writer took some liberties with creating the story, but just to know what happened in that room has always been something that's been, in the back of my head. Um, I enjoyed the film tremendously. Um, and I know we're going to get into the conversation a little later, but I enjoyed the dialogue coming from four different walks of life. And, and these men, Malcolm X close to 40 at the time, uh, Sam Cooke early 30s, Jim Brown closing in on 30, Cassius Clay at 22. So just to see where they are at that stage, with everything going on around them. So I was really, really just impressed by how it all came together. And I'll try to reserve all the rest of the comments for the conversation.
Word, word. And shout out to Marla Harris for tuning in, as well as R and Gabriel. Marla says it's HU alum Kent Powers for writing both the play and now the screenplay. So definitely want to give love. Because black folk, they not gonna let you get away with not without honoring other black folk, which is necessary, right? So shout out to Kent Powers. Whoever you are and wherever you are appreciated. So what about you, Dr. Love?
I mean, I feel similar to Brother Latif. It was something that I've been waiting for. I mean, I'd heard about it when the play came out. I didn't see the play. I think it was maybe 2012, somewhere around there, 11, 12. Heard about it, and the reviews were coming in from the stage play and were pretty good. But I didn't know a whole lot about this night. When I read about the play, then stuff started to come into context. I didn't, and I definitely didn't know anything about Sam Cooke in that evening. I enjoyed the film, but probably like a lot of us, when I saw the trailer, it was shiny, it was glossy, and it wasn't about doubting Regina King. It's just what the product generally winds up being a lot of times when we see the stuff. So I was kind of I went into it cautiously. And the day before, or maybe that morning, I can't remember, but whenever you posted was the same day that I had watched it for the first time. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, I had some critiques like probably all of us do and everyone will. It's not a perfect piece of art, but nothing is. But in terms of what I think Regina King was trying to do, and reading one of her interviews this weekend in the Times about what she was trying to do, I think it held close to that. I think the liberties that Powers took with it, I think is allowable in this circumstance because it doesn't drift far from who these individuals were. Some of the storylines is different maybe from what exactly happened, but I think that's storytelling. You have to kind of insert some of those liberties, but I enjoyed it. At the end, I felt good about what I had watched. And I actually watched it 2 more times. I watched a little bit more of it this morning in preparation for this evening, but I enjoyed it.
Word, word. And last but not least, the good brother Zane. What were your thoughts?
I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know about the night. I didn't know that the only relationship I was aware of was the relationship between Malcolm and Muhammad Ali, but I didn't know the relationship between Cook and all them. So it was like a wonderful discovery for me. So I didn't have too many expectations. I was going in just to sort of learn what the dynamics were between these men and what that story was. I was excited about seeing Regina King come into her own in terms of, having top billing as a director, because I really respect her as an actor, and as a director. I mean, and I wasn't disappointed at all. Actually, I thought it was brilliant, and I love the fact that it's from a stage play, because that gives it a whole. It just makes the language. You just pay attention to the language and the dialogue a lot more, because it was conceived to be heard that way.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, again, and I don't want to say I might be the youngest person out the bunch, right? But I wasn't aware of the relationships amongst the four at all, right? At the end, and I'm not spoiling it because if you haven't seen it, then that's shame on you. At the end with that picture that that's has such notoriety and is circulated for dozens for a half a century now with all four of them within the cafe. I was able to say aha, right? But that was my only the only knowledge that I really had with regards to these individuals coming together at any point. I wasn't aware that they had some type of friendship, right? I think coming into it for me, I was afraid. I was afraid because it's coming off the heels of Soul, where black folks skewered Soul, and I'm just like, are we going to find something wrong with this? Right? Like, what's going to be wrong instead of thinking about everything that can go right with this film? And so I watched it with a little bit of trepidation, not necessarily about what the film was offering, but how we as a community was going to respond to it. I've been pleasantly surprised. I can say because I've seen nothing but positive feedback. I don't go to white media for for their critiques on our art. So if I see Rotten Tomatoes got a 92%, I'm like, all right, I'm not paying that any mind, right? Because that's not us. But when I start to see other black folk um, offer high praise to the film, it encouraged me even more to not only watch it but to have a conversation about it again amongst other brothers. And so with that being said, I don't want to go on a tangent too much, but what are your thoughts with regards to just how we're critiquing our own art these days? There was a lot of pushback with Ma Rainey that I read. There was pushback with Soul. So just what are your thoughts with regards to the critiques that are coming out, or maybe you haven't seen it or heard about the critiques? And so again, anybody can respond to that.
What was the critique about Ma Rainey?
The- I'm
I'm
trying
sorry.
to. No,
I
no,
didn't know
no.
we here.
Yeah, no. Listen, it's rhetorically speaking. We're here for everything, right? What was the critique about Ma Rainey? It was. Oh, yeah. It was about Viola Davis wearing a fat suit, right? And so it was a lot of people that I've read. I hate to say a lot of people because I don't know everybody, but it was a lot of pushback against that idea. Why couldn't they find some a full figured uh, black woman to play that role? And I think when focusing on it took away a little bit, right? It took away from the phenomenal job that she did. The fact that she had to gain weight for the role, she reached 200 pounds, and then she still had to end up wearing a suit. It's just like she shouldn't have done that. She should have relinquished the role to a bigger woman. It making the same argument that was akin to Zoe Saldana when she played Nina Simone. And so I think we're in this interesting space when it comes to art because everybody has a platform, right? Like I'm here right now with y'all for, and we're able to sit and critique everything. So that's why I wanted to just pose that question about just where you think we are when it comes to the critiquing of our art specifically.
I mean, I think where we are where we have always been. I think that's part of putting work out there in the world is that everyone is going to have an opinion about it. But I think I guess what I try to pay attention to, which is the point you make when you talk about where you get the opinion from, is what is that person like? What is it? Because everybody comes with their perspective, and if they're missing something, then that's the thing they're going to be looking for. I mean, to a degree. I mean, that's a general statement. But I mean, if I'm a black person and a white person is playing a black role, then I'm gonna be upset. You know what I mean? If I'm a big person and a skinny person is playing a big role, I'm gonna be upset. If I'm a dark skinned person and a light skinned person is playing a dark skinned, a role that was meant for a dark skinned person, I might be upset. You know what I mean? But I think as a person who's creating a vision, they may not always be seeing that. They may be seeing the best actor or the best this or the best that, or they may be insensitive to those people, and that's another issue.
Word.
I think we also got to consider like what's the relationship to the art, right? Whether people are coming to view or listen or read with just, I don't want to say just hating the art, but just coming from a critical space all the time, right? Just this negative space, and just looking for whatever it is that they can figure out that's wrong, and just have something negative to talk about. But and oftentimes it's deserved. There's some bad black art out there. Like, we can't just believe like everything is great, you know. And so we have to have space for criticism, but we also have to allow the space for praise as well, and not want to go against the current just because people are praising it, right? And so you're looking for that one little thing, that one line that didn't sit well with you. But just allow the space for the art to grow, because that's how we start to minimize and end up in these narrow spaces where we don't have the art.
Word.
Where we don't have enough representation of the art.
Yeah.
I think I would defend August Wilson's work to the day that I die, and I think Denzel Washington is being responsible with his work, along with Wilson's family, his wife in particular, his partner in particular, who's holding, making sure that Wilson's work stays in front of us. I think Wilson's body of work is important, and if it makes it to the screen responsibly, I'm all for it. I mean, Denzel Washington said he's going to bring all 10 to the screen, so this is 2 in the bag. Wilson was also part of course, piano lesson when he was alive with Charles Dutton and those cats. So that's on screen now. You can catch that probably on YouTube platforms, right? And I saw some of the criticisms and critiques. I think some of them, aside from in terms of what was being said about the casting of Viola Davis, I think it was coming from, and this is me just being again defensive of, or for Wilson's work. Some folk weren't familiar with his work, and so the way in which they were examining it was outside of what Wilson was trying to do, and that's part of the challenge. There's plenty of information that we could have outside of his plays. Wilson, August spoke for himself, so that's one thing. I think the other thing that what other brothers were mentioning, we do have to hold our black artists accountable, right? Nobody's above critique, but your critique has to be informed. I think I always reference to my students what Elaine Locke said, Philly's own Elaine Locke, where he said, the black artists, he was talking about specifically music, they have to be responsible, but the audience also has to be intelligent enough to hold them accountable, right? And this wasn't a question of intellect. That's not where I'm moving towards at all. It's a question of being informed, you know what I mean? So you can not like a thing because it doesn't sit well with you, but to be critical of it on an artistic level is something entirely different if you're not informed about what the artist was trying to do. We could argue that art is interpretive, okay, but then that doesn't necessarily leave space for the critique, So, but then if we vacillate to Du Bois said all black art should be propaganda, right? When he gives when he gives the award to Woodson in New York, so he's the criteria of Negro art was the speech that he gave that was then later transcribed into the essay. But Du Bois said all black art should be propaganda. In other words, we ain't got the time for it just to be art for art's sake. Let the purists argue about that. But where we at now as black folk, and we can make the case that where we are now as black folk, it still has to be propaganda. And so I think what Denzel did with that cast of performers with Wilson's work was, to me, was in the right direction. Again, it's not perfect, a lot of different things, but I think that also comes with the work as well. I'm sure there's a lot Denzel wanted to keep in, but for the sake of time and everything else, just wouldn't work out, right? He worked with Viola Davis with Wilson's stage plays, and there's something to be said about being familiar with someone. You can move a different way with the work when that person is familiar with it as well, and them, so you can direct them. So some of it was just probably personal choice and being familiar with it, but again, it's not beyond reproach. I think folk have some valid concerns, and it's important to push artists further to be mindful of those things. But like the good brother Zane said, if you're on the other side of it, you're going to see it differently from what it was, if that's the thing that's kind of, you think, pushing you out of that space, or you're not being represented in that space. it's a necessary critique, but I think it needs to stay. We need to be informed about those critiques as well.
Word, word. On to the film, right? On to the film. That's why we're all
My
here.
bad.
No. Listen, you good, man. Again, we appreciate this information. I'm appreciative for everybody tuned in. Zakia, Marla, Sharia, Dominique, Jamal. Definitely appreciate you. So one night in Miami, and for me, I felt like this film was under the constant tension of Malcolm in relation to what was taking place with the NOI in his life at that time. So I felt like that was the overarching framework for this film. Again, like Al Latif said, this is fictional, right? Not the events that was taking place around that time, but just this story. And so I tried to remember that, especially watching it this second time. And I was hyper focused on how Malcolm was showing up throughout. And so I guess the first theme that I wanted to talk about was one that's so meaningful to me. Is just this idea of relationships amongst black men. And there was, even within that, it was so multi-layered, right? We had the cross-generational relationship between Malcolm and Muhammad, right? Malcolm was what, 37, 38 around that time. Muhammad, I'm gonna call him Muhammad. Muhammad was 22, even though he was Cassius during that time. You had the relationship between Sam Cooke and Malcolm. You had the relationship between Malcolm and himself. And all of these individuals with themselves, especially Jim Brown. I thought for somebody to have the least amount of lines in the film, the lines that he did have were the most poignant. I think about his scene in the bathroom where he's having this moment of am I capitulating to white folk, right? With my career. So I want to talk about this idea just of relationships. And again, you can take it wherever you want. So we start with you, Zane.
I mean, I thought it showed the beauty and complexity of black male relationships and all of its glory, because I think that I just love the way they could fight and recover from that fight. You know what I mean? And I feel like those were conversations that had escalated for years, probably between Sam Cooke, or that particular conversation had happened before. And I thought that for them to be at the height of their career, and if it existed in real life, it certainly was shown on film, that there was there was a love, but it wasn't like a sappy love. There was like,
It's intimate.
it was intimate. Yeah.
Relationships are very
There
intimate.
was something that was really close about them. You know what I mean? And they understood the power that they had, and the complexity of their lives in that moment. Like, I don't think that any of them, the way it was depicted in there, was not going through something. And the catalyst to bring out everybody else's drama was Malcolm's drama. And that's what Brother Love was saying, I think, or Latif was saying. But yeah, I thought I was drawn into it, and I was compelled to watch it again.
Like as Zane was saying, like just that heaviness of all the decisions that each of them had to make, and how that made them interact with each other that night, right? Jim Brown waited until everyone was alone, till he was alone with Cassius to talk about the movie, right? Yeah, Malcolm had the heaviness of being, silenced at the time and on his way out of the NOI, and his decision to make to try to break. But a lot of that teamed on what happened in that room that night with Cassius Clay, right? And the next couple of months. You got Sam Cooke, who already was thinking, I have to do more with my music, right? I've been singing, here I am 31, 32 years old, and I'm singing rock and roll, which is considered teenage music, but I'm not reaching my people the way I need to be, right? So we already seen his change to, becoming more soulful with his music at the time. And then you had Bob Dylan blowing in the wind in the back of his mind, right? And so all this is coming together this night. And, just like you do with your friends, it can boil over. It can boil over. But like Zane said, they can go back and hug after that fight. And that's part of the complexity of our relationships, right? We hug, we fight, we laugh, we joke, we cut too deep sometimes, but we'll give you a Band-Aid afterwards. Right? So I think that was that running dialogue of the relationships was the common thread throughout the movie that I really loved.
Word.
Yeah, man. I agree. I loved how Regina King showed them all in their separate worlds before they kind of end up in Miami and dealing with their own thing. Man, that Jim Brown scene caught me completely off guard. When he goes back to his home, I see your hand, brother. He goes back to his hometown. He just, the guy's building him. I mean, and that just shows you. I think they talk about it a little bit, not that specific, but just kind of like the white liberal and with that. I mean, because this guy was perfectly comfortable, with addressing that way and saying, no, you can't even come to my crib. You know what I mean? Not even making the exception for somebody who said, I'm proud to say I'm from this town. And then them all, and that just reminds me of the relationships that I have with brothers who I have intimate relationships with for long term. We could be, we come together sometimes because of all of that weight that we're carrying, but all of that stuff happens in those spaces. And we saw that, right? Malcolm's at this pivotal period of his life, about to make this serious transition, but he's still trying to do the work that he's committed to while carrying the family and being kind of the elder on that space. But it's also the same thing that happens that we see. The brother who comes with the most wisdom or who is the elder, he still gets schooled and taught by some of the younger folk. I think it was that one scene where he's taking a photograph, but he's on the outside of him, and they kind of remind him, like, you don't even live in the world that we live in, right? When him and Sam are getting into it, Sam's like, I think it was Sam or maybe Jim Brown, like, you never even had a job, but then he catches her like, you got a job, but not like us, you know what I mean? And I like that because we rarely see Malcolm in the film depictions or television depictions not being in absolute control in the center. Even when his life is being challenged in these things, he's still kind of calm, cool, and collected. And even in this, he was. And he reminds him, like, hey, when I was Detroit Red, he doesn't say that, but he's like, listen, my name rings out in the streets, and then they clown him again, right? Like, hey, man, that old word. Like, I think Sam Cooke said the best line, man. Like, your rep don't carry over decades, you know what I mean? Like that, you can take that, take that back to the store, so to speak. But
the words for the 40s.
Yeah, man. And we see how even the thing that he valued in that moment, his relationship with Betty through that camera, Regina's representing that through the camera, right? And how they even join him about that, you know what I mean? Like, even the point of, like, when you need to run from the FBI, you got your other camera, so even the things that we take serious, when you with brothers who you trust, or when you with friends who you trust, they can joke with you because through all of that, if it does come down to those things, they still got your back. But I love the way that it showed those individual relationships that they had with themselves, especially Jim Brown and Mary, man. I think I let off a few thug tears with that one. You know what I mean? Because he never talks about his, Jim Brown always talks about going forward. He never really talks about what he's dealing with, He's always talking about kind of his next moves, and so what he's dealing with is not really necessarily known. But I loved how she portrayed those relationships being, even the way that she placed them on the bed, right? You know what I mean? Like, there was no one trying to find their space in the bed. The two of them sitting on one side, two of them sitting on the other side. Nobody trying to, do the cool pose and spread your legs so you got enough space. None of that stuff. They were very intimate with each other already in a small motel room. So they didn't necessarily need to be close to hear one another, but it was that intimacy and trust that they had amongst each other in terms of the way that she placed them in that space too. I think it was important.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, when I was sitting watching it both times, you know, I tried to juxtapose this idea of masculinity some 50, 60 years ago versus today. And all I have is my relationships with the brothers that I know and the ones that I observe within my, you know, the work that I do. And, you know, I sit and think there were definitely some similarities, right? So this idea of who can hurt who more, right? I think that was something that existed when he pulled out the Bob Dylan record, right? Like he wanted to hurt him in that moment because he felt vulnerable, he was hurt, the veil was down. And I think that was something that was important with this film is because again, when I think of Jim Brown, I think of my most recent images of Jim Brown being with y'all president, not mine, up in the White House, right? I think about Jim, who's in the film. What was that film? That awful film he was in. Maybe about 25, 30 years ago with the gang members and all of that.
Original gangsters.
Original gangsters. I think about Jim Brown in that light. Again, because I'm 37, 36, 37 years of age. I don't think about Jim as being this pivotal figure during the movement. And so, you know, when I sit and think about the relationships between the two, again, that vulnerability and accountability that was taking place during that time, right? Because even though it came across, Malcolm came across as an asshole when he pulled. Matter of fact, let me go get that Bob Dylan record. Let you hear what you not doing. It
He
was
played. He just show him.
yeah, exactly. He put it on. Like number one, why do you have that with you? That's first. That's my first question. Why you got that with you, man?
That moment.
Yeah,
You was ready for that moment.
exactly. Just in case
You've been
something.
thinking about that for a week.
Yeah,
And you say something, I'm gonna just pull this out on them.
right.
Better than the off score. That was better than the off score. Man.
And so it could but he's saying, listen, brother, you know, and Malcolm was so caught up in this being a weapon, and Jim Brown said, listen, I'm not nobody's weapon, and that made me sit back and think about. I'm out here using my skills, but I still have to remember that I'm a human being at the end of the day, somebody with thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And I don't think in that moment of pulling the Bob Dylan out, even though he wanted to hold Sam Cooke accountable, like, listen, we need a little bit more from you. It was still done in a way that was probably counterproductive in something that we experience is black men, especially now. I sit and observe these relationships. That might have been a cutoff where we are in 2020, 2021, right? Because we cutting people off with the quickness. And so that might have been enough to say, "Oh, forget you. I'm gonna unfollow you. I'm gonna block you. If I see you out in the street, it's gonna be issues." But now you know what? Muhammad went with Sam Cooke out to go to the store. Jim talked with Malcolm to check him, right? And then they were still able to reconvene. And that's one of the things that I tried to do when I was having the hashtag You Good Man groups. And I promise you, it's coming back. The purpose of the group was to allow brothers to have those moments where we are going to elevate. Shit ain't going to be peachy keen all the time. We're going to have differing viewpoints. Our tones might get elevated, but we still need to see it once we come down and we're able to either agree to disagree or see each other's viewpoint. And I think that's something that, and I look at this being pre-hip hop culture too, right? Where, again, I don't need you. I'm about self. I'm about individual. But these brothers recognize that community, and they recognize community in the individual, if that makes sense.
It's a lot of sense.
Word.
I think the thing that was really in the front was, who am I? Was the question. Who am I? How am I going to interact in the world? And what is my relationship to this struggle, which now, we know we always known it's real, but like last Wednesday was just like, yo, oh, this is like, this is blowing our minds how real is getting. Like, it's getting more real. It was real then. It's still real. The struggle is real. And how do you want to deal with it? Like, I feel like it's the Booker T. Washington, Du Bois fight. it's the Malcolm Martin fight. You know what I mean? And not that those are the only sort of four ways of looking at things, but I think that whole question with Sam Cooke is really, really interesting to me because being a sellout from somebody's point of view and you have your own sort of agenda and it's strategic and the economic part of it is as valid. It is as valid. And I think, Phil, you have made this point before, and I think about Jay-Z. You know what I mean? How is he using his money? You know what I mean? Sitting down with the NFL. You know what I mean? Being a part of that organization. What was his moves? What was the strategy there? And and I don't think that any of them are selling out. And Malcolm, his voice is relevant, of course. I mean, it echoes throughout time. His words echoes throughout time. But that's not the only way. You know what I mean? Especially in terms of those men. And one more point, I think that moment when you were saying, Dr. Love, when Jim Brown goes back to his hometown, it was as powerful in the film to me as Wednesday was.
Ooh. Mm.
Just that he had to sit there and endure that, and he was frozen.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of times when we're faced with such blatant thing like that Capitol thing, what do we say? What could you say? Except we know that's what it is. We know that. It couldn't be articulated and manifested in a greater way. And people will still tell us that that's not what happened.
Mm.
That thing is not what happened. That man would not let him step across his door. And he said, what kind of mind screwing is that? Like, how do you even process that? He couldn't even process it verbally. And you saw him processing that throughout the whole film. Mm-hmm. That moment is the dilemma that we find ourselves in terms of economy and righteousness and struggle. We find ourselves facing this white devil, right, who will say all of this praise and suck you in and then call you a nigga. Yeah. To your face.
Yeah.
Especially when we know the violence of Jim Brown, you know, whether it's on the football field or his interaction with women, right? Yeah. So we know the violence of him. So he's standing in that moment and not reacting violently.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, you know, as we see him, you know, whether he's pensive or just pondering throughout the rest of the film, it's like, did I react correctly? Should I have went in there and just grabbed him by his throat? Like, you know, am I this person? So it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, I will let you get in real quick, Doug Love, but he brought up a great point, and Zane talked about it. This who am I? This identity piece that so many black men grapple with, and it takes us a long time, unfortunately, for many of us to get to that point to where we have some semblance of who we are and how we see ourselves in the world, not how everybody else sees us. And I thought that was encapsulated when Malcolm was about to say, you know, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said, "Nah, I didn't ask you about Elijah Muhammad. I asked you about you, right? Like, what do you think?" And that was so profound because, again, this idea that we have of who Malcolm is, right? He would get killed less than a year later. After you know, this meetup, and again still asking him, who are you? But I think that played a part in his trip to Mecca, him, you know, going away from the NOY, him trying to figure out who he is in the midst of this struggle that he finds himself. And that was a theme amongst all the brothers. Who am I? Cassius Clay, I'm 22 years old. I'm on top of the world. White folk love me, the Beatles, and all of these things. And here I got Malcolm telling me I need to figure out who I am and what my role is. Sam Cooke, same thing. Jim Brown, listening to hear them talking about, you know, entertaining white folk. right? And entertaining the families of white folk, and he's just like, is there more to me than this? That's why he was so excited about to say, listen, I'm I'm doing these movies. Right, it wasn't even necessary. He wasn't talking about, oh, I'm getting paid. Yeah, we learned he made 30,000 a film. He wasn't even excited about the money. It was more so, I'm doing something different. I'm trying to tap into the other aspects of me. And we took Zane and I have had this conversation for so many black men. We attach our identity to the thing that we're good at, right? So if it's football, it's being an orator, it's being a singer, it's being a football player. But there's so many other aspects to us if we allow ourselves to really tap in to see what that is. I know you was about to say something, Dr. Love. My bad.
Oh no, man, you summed it up, brother. I'm just I think about that all the time in terms of even my own growth and development. Like who we. And I was talking to a good brother this morning about we. I found out we grew up and was raised in the same neighborhood in Philly at a certain point, and the maneuvering that we had to do, and what you get recognition for, the pat on the backs that you get recognition for, and how that shapes and molds the type of man that you grow into. And holding on to that thing that gives you that kind of self-identity, but that's not the all of who you are. Some of it's destructive, trying to break out of that thing as well and pivot or turn and grow, but not wanting to lose that relationship that you had from acceptance, you know what I mean, from the outside world, man. That's a huge thing. And you look at Jim Brown, in his silence, it said so much about him transitioning. This is probably someone who was an athlete his entire life, right? Was always getting a pass from the back, goes to Syracuse. I think was an athlete in damn near every athletic program they had up there, chose football. I think he was huge lacrosse as well. I think his background,
Yeah.
right? And then 9 years in the league. I mean, he pulls the Barry Sanders. He just he retires at the beginning of the season because he doesn't want to leave. I think he was making dirty dozen. He was making dirty dozen. And Modell wanted him to come back earlier. He's like, no, y'all gonna have to work this out. But you see that in Jim Brown, man, that outside of football, who am I? And I think, again, going back to that opening scene, it had to make him think of his relationship with his fans, throughout his whole life, where y'all love me, but y'all would never, you ain't marry me to your daughters. You ain't never gonna let me in your house. You know what I mean? I think was it Jim Brown who said, we just gladiators, you know what I mean? Waiting for the thumbs up, thumbs down. You know what I mean? So I think we was talking to Cassius Clay at the time, Muhammad Ali at the time. You know what I'm saying? We got the same relationship. We just gladiators to these folk. And, we just waiting. We just waiting for the emperor basically to say yay or nay to us after this fight is done.
It's also who am I versus who they want me to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you want me to be the smiling running back who runs really hard and gets the touchdowns, right? Or the heavyweight champ or the singer. But that's not all I am. And so as we start to explore what else am I, I think that becomes, a big part of each of their journeys, right? I'm a singer, but I can use my voice to move my people. I'm a fighter. I can use my platform to speak out for my people. I'm a football player, but I can also be an advocate, right? Because we can say what we want about Jim Brown. Every time there was something or some gathering, he was there, right? He's sitting right next to Muhammad Ali, at the famed picture with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and other athletes. We know the work he did with American, but you can't let go of the other stuff with Jim Brown either, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's if they start to explore the other parts of him, right? And that's what, unfortunately, Malcolm wasn't able to do at that point in his life. He was so consumed with everything going on around him, with the nation, with his pilgrimage, everything, the FBI, the people with the snakes within the nation, like all of that just consumed. He didn't get a chance to be anything but who he was and who people wanted him to be at that time. That's the shame of it.
I wondered about that, man. I'm glad you brought it up, brother. Malcolm had an urgency about his life. I think at that point he knew it was coming to an end soon. Not knew exactly, of course, but I think because he was getting his affairs in order. Right? They talk about, he said, I need to write this biography so my life could be told. I think he knew he was going to be, he was going to be murdered soon, man. And so I wonder what that urgency had, especially being as the elder statesman in that room, but having that sense of urgency and wanting to make sure that things were going to be okay with Black folk. And these three brothers were going to, especially maybe coming down on Sam, Sam, I guess, would have been the second oldest in that room, right? Sam Cooke, and making sure, hey, we ain't got time to play. Like, this thing can end real quick, and like Brother Phillip said, less than a year later, he's gunned down, in the Autobahn. So I wonder what that heat that he felt on his neck, you know what I mean? That he's almost portrayed as kind of, and I'm not saying he was, but rightly paranoid. When he comes in, he's checking the lamp to see if it's bugged and all that other stuff. He's looking out the window. I don't know. I've had stressful moments, highly stressful moments, and trauma and things like this, but I don't know what that means to know that death is imminent, for you,
Yeah. And then just to juxtapose that, Sam Cooke dies less than 9 months later.
Yeah.
Right? 10 months later or whatever.
Yeah.
But he has none of that urgency.
Yeah, because he doesn't see it around the corner. I mean, Sam Cooke
doesn't see it coming.
Yeah, Sam Cooke is moving forward. I think right before this, right after this, him and Muhammad Ali cut that record. You know what I mean? So he's moving forward.
The gang's all here. Yeah.
Lord, this is news to me. They got a record together.
Yeah. I think it was shortly before this, right? Because he has his own label, his own imprint. And that's some of the rumors around his murder. They're saying he was set up by his manager, right? Klein, I think the guy's name was. Yeah, him and Muhammad was, they made an album together, or he was producing an album for Muhammad, stuff like that. So Sam Cooke was looking, his thing was going up.
That's interesting that you bring that up. There's that urgency, because that's what I felt. I felt in my gut, like I felt this tension, right? Yeah. And I think they got the perfect brother to play Brother Kareem. Right, Major Daniels from The Wire. Yeah, Commissioner Daniels, because he has that. Yeah. I don't trust this much. He got that look, right, in these films that he's in, and so there was again this constant tension with Malcolm, and it felt like with Muhammad, it was more so. I'm gonna branch off, do my own thing, but I want to pass the baton to you. That's what I felt more so, was like he was trying to pass the baton to everybody. Listen, I need you to do this. Sam, I need you to do a little bit more, because he knew his time was coming to an end. And when you talk about this, this urgency, because he knew his life was coming to an end. I think about that Biggie interview that plays, that excerpt that plays in the middle of More Money, More Problems, right? Where he's sitting there and he's like, he got this feeling that somebody out to kill him, right? And it's like, I can only imagine what that feels like. But then I think about it. I just gotta go to Chicago, right? To go to and how these young men, these young boys are living out there. They're living with this urgency of, I see what's happening around me. I'm not going to be here, so I got to get what I can get while I'm here, because making it to 18, 25 isn't necessarily a guarantee. As opposed to somebody like myself who grew up in West Mountain area, even though my brother, God bless him, did die at 25, that played a part, definitely impacted me, right? But I still could see a little bit beyond that. And so there was an urgency, but not necessarily that type where this can all end tomorrow, right? So I'm glad you brought up that point. And so I want to talk about a few relationships specifically, and again, shout out to both Jamals, Jamal Jones, Jamal Johnson tuned in, Daryl tuned in, Angie. Make sure you hit that share button and the like button. That hit up the algorithms. You know what I mean? Subscribe, most definitely. So Malcolm and Muhammad, I didn't necessarily get a little brother, older brother feel. I got a father son type of feel from their relationship. Is it just me, or did anybody else get that?
I mean, there's multiple dynamics, right? Yeah. So there's the teacher, the student, right? The minister, the the congregant. There's the father, the son, the big brother, little brother. So there's all these relationships that play within their one relationship, right? Partly because of Malcolm's experience, his position. So Muhammad Ali has this reverence for him. Partly he's new in the religion, so he's learning. But also he's not the most learned man at all, right? So he has to absorb a whole lot. And so, so all those dynamics are, at work within their relationship. But by no means is he like a follower of him, right? He's still his own man. And so that's the important part, because, he makes his own decision, within weeks of that day, which unfortunately left Malcolm, out to dry.
Yeah. You've been quiet, Zane. What are your thoughts?
No, I was just, the words that were coming up were in that relationship. I just remember the scene when you feel like your friend is using you. You know what I mean? I thought that was really powerful. And I think that wasn't easy for Malcolm to even strategize in his mind. It didn't feel like it. I don't think the director nor the writer wanted that to feel like something that he wanted to do. I felt like the point that you made, Phil, I think, about giving out duties and him feeling like things are coming and he had to get all these things done. Like, you got to save my people. I got to make sure my family is good. I got to get these people away from this crazy minister over here doing all this crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Like, he had all this stuff on his plate, and I gotta make sure people are. And this young man might be the one that can start this new thing and help me brand it. You know what I mean? For lack of a better term, and give it some validity. But I don't think that was easy for him. And I think he really hurt the young boy when that happened, even though he had enough perspective to understand that it might have been a necessary pain. You know what I mean? It might have been something that was necessary. I think he could see what Malcolm saw in the NOI. You know what I mean? He wasn't privy to that kind of inside information. But I think he was on a personal level, which is why the intimacy was so important in that whole buildup of intimacy. And then you break that by using me.
Wow.
You know what I mean? That was the whole tension. That all of that intimacy boiled down to that moment. It was so powerful, and he was so hurt. But like we said about how we recover, it's like, come on, man, then just come out here and stand next to me. Like, I don't know if I really forgave you, but I understand that this is important for you to be with me right now. Yeah. You know, that was painful though.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Brother Zane, because to me, I saw it like big brother, little brother, but all of those roles that the big brother and little brother play, so it can be father and son, especially in the absence of a father in your life and these other things. Definitely was spiritual mentor. You see that really intimate moment where he corrects his hand, when they're praying, you know what I mean? And these small little things, but I think it speaks to the beauty, but also, man, the pain that comes with being vulnerable and intimate in relationship, whatever type of relationship it is, so because that trust is shattered quickly, so he catches him off guard. He's like, you just using me, and probably felt like, maybe you was using me like everybody else,
Right.
So, but then what Brother Zane pointed out, when they go out to that conference, the press conference outside the room, he says, come on with me. Malcolm's like, no, I ain't got nothing to say. He's like, no, just come on out with me, kind of stand with me, But then, of course, he turns his back on Malcolm, or he follows the orders of the Nation of Islam, and he doesn't. Malcolm's cut off, and so by extension, Muhammad Ali, I think, said that's one of his biggest regrets was doing that, But that's that intimacy as well, man. When you got to repair that pain that somebody caused you, you still something just won't let you be vulnerable in the same way again,
Yeah.
Because so much is poured into those relationships, so much love and trust is poured into him, man, when that thing is shattered, sometimes it's beyond repair, even for a slight infraction, because I think Malcolm was, I think Betty was telling him, like, you got to tell him, what I mean? Like, he needs to know, so it was heavy on him. But just how do you do that? I've prepared you to be part of the nation and I'm leaving the nation, you know what I mean? So, and kind of want you to go with me to Muslim Mosque Incorporated and this OAAU thing I'm starting up, you know what I mean? So as you did on the night that you became the heavyweight champion, I don't even know what that means, man. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean for somebody? You at the top of your career right now, and it's just starting, and then somebody just kind of burst your bubble in that moment for something that you about to put your whole thing into, So, but I think it was important that it was shown in that way. But man, those relationships, it takes, like we all know, it takes a lot of tending to, to have a true vulnerable relationship with anyone. Even with ourselves.
Yeah, especially when it comes to cross-generational relationships, right? Because we think that there's this gap that exists, right? Your experience from your generation versus mine, and here we are. I'm allowing you in, right? Muhammad allowed him in. Like he was he just won the world heavyweight championship for the world, and he's sitting there chilling with everybody. Yet he leaves to go and pray against what Michael Imperioli was telling him, right? Like, nah, you don't want to do that. You don't want to rock with them, right? Or they had everybody from The Wire in there, right? It was good to see what's his name in there, man. I wonder what was happening to it. But he was like, listen, he at 22. For him to push that aside and say, I'm gonna go here and pray with this man, the trust that's needed for that to take place, and then to have his heart broken. That's what it was, right? We need to call it what it is. He had his heart broken by Malcolm on probably one of the biggest nights of his life. Somebody he loves and somebody he admires, and I can fully understand why irreparable harm and damage might have been done. And again, we see that so often in these situations where the father, the older brother, make an unhealthy choice with regards, and the kids say, well, F y'all, I'm out, right? We're all educators. We've seen it. What it takes to engage the youth, right? It's not easy at times, right? And so, again, I empathize with Malcolm, not Malcolm, with even with Malcolm in that situation, but definitely with Cassius, who would later be known as Muhammad Ali in that situation.
I think what's interesting too, and I'm probably focusing on this because I'm taking this class, but it's leadership class. There's a power dynamic that is of course front and center, and it's like how you exert your power. And I think when you were saying, was it Phil? How can I hurt you? Like or was it Dr. Love? Like you use this thing. He pulled out that song to hurt him, but that was a power play. It was like, what tools do you have to exert power in any given situation in a relationship? Is knowledge. He had information about this album. You know what I mean? It's coercion. It's like, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to, it's all of these sort of different sort of tools that you have to exert power, and Malcolm was using all of them. He was using, all different kinds of ways of trying to get people to see what he was seeing. And I think Jim was doing the same thing. All of them had different ways of using their power, you know what I mean, in those moments. And everybody had a different role. And how do you show up? How do you want to be presented? I think that's also in the friendship too. That was like interesting. Like, how do I want you to see me? But Jim saw him for who he actually was. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a beautiful moment. I know how you want to be seen, Malcolm, but I see you, brother. I see you. You know what I mean? I see where some of this stuff is coming from, and you can't tell me that that's not there. And I thought that was brilliant. The insight of the playwright, and then the translation of those moments, in a universal sense for all of us, I thought was brilliant. Like, that's the struggle. there's this interior struggle that we can see between us that doesn't really involve the outside world necessarily. I mean, it always does, but sometimes it doesn't. Like that conversation between him and Jim Brown, like you said, was always hitting the hitting the heart of it. Like
Yeah.
his insight was radioactive,
Yeah.
you know, for him to go straight to that light skin thing. And that's an obvious thing in our community, but we don't always acknowledge how much force that has about how we move in different spaces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You just go through the spaces and we joke and laugh about it because we know it's there, but it really does cause a lot of tension. Like I see it in spaces, intimate spaces. And and I'm the Muhammad Ali in those spaces, not in terms of I'm the kid who's trying to make everybody feel better. You know what I mean? I'm still that kid from the dynamics that my cousins and we have from when we were kids. That stuff goes way back then. This dark skinned cousin, that light skinned cousin, and they start singing crazy songs, and you trying to make a joke to make sure that one's not crying no more. Like, and Muhammad Ali was playing that role in that space. Like, it was so interesting. Like you had so many dynamics. You had a nuclear family dynamic. You had you had our colorism dynamic in there. You had this power dynamic. It was like all these themes that they didn't just tease him out. She
Yeah.
Well, with that, and to stick on the colorism thing, because that was one of the points, right? I think it was a tease initially, right? Because I say the movie started at the 1 hour mark, for real. Even though I appreciated the backstory, the 1 hour mark when they was and they went to go on the roof, and then they ended up back in the room, and all of that what took place occurred. But the tease was when Sam was coming in, he said that sandpaper ass nigga. Right. And so that started the colorism tease with that. And then it hit you with Jim Brown acknowledging it, right? And forcing Malcolm to look at it. And Malcolm having to take a step back and recognize and say, well, damn, Jim, you made a salient point. Right. And again, this idea that we have about Jim Brown, that we have about our black athletes, the shut up and dribble that Lauren Ingram told LeBron, like we don't think of them as necessarily intellects, right? We think of them as just, as he said, gladiators, thumbs up, thumbs down. And so, again, that's why I think Jim's, the performance there and the storyline for him was so important, because he was the one who, given this idea that we have of Jim being in this rough and tumble sport, when Malcolm was crying, he the one that, with the proximity, walking up to him, putting his hand on his shoulder, right, to for that level of intimacy that you might not necessarily would think would come from somebody like Jim Brown. You would think that would come from a Sam Cooke, right, because he's this, just based off the music, he's more of a feeler as opposed to Jim Brown. But it was Jim who was sitting there, helping him through this difficult moment. And so that's, I definitely wanted to stick on that color piece just for a second. And y'all feel free to comment on it, or we can move on. It's up to you.
Well, the thing that comes in my mind is just the emotional, the emotional transparency that they let come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the other relationship was, and again, it was so many different dynamics, but I think that Sam and Malcolm relationship was heavy, man. That was that was like brothers, right? Where, again, it's the knockout, punch out, drag out, all in the name of love and accountability. And so if anybody wants to speak to that relationship specifically, because I think it forced Sam to, Malcolm said what Sam was feeling, right? And it hurts at times when your brother, when your loved one, and I know for me, listen, I listen, somebody could critique me, and I'm gonna be the hell pissed off. People know not to critique me right in that moment, right? But they know I'm gonna sit with it and think about it because that's just where I am, right? And so I felt Sam in that situation because I've been there where somebody's critiquing you might not necessarily be the best way, but they're telling you what you already feel about yourself and how that can impact you in that moment in time. So if one of you brothers want to speak to just that relationship between Sam and Malcolm.
That was tough to watch, right? Like because those cuts were really deep, and like you said, those were low blows and intentional. So it's tough to watch, especially when you have a reverence for both people, right? So it's like I'm a huge Sam Cooke fan, and so he's saying stuff, and I'm like, that's not true. That's not true. So it's like I'm in there defending him, but it's necessary for the story, right? And necessary for the conversation outside of the film, right? So now we can have the conversation about economic empowerment, right? We can have the conversation about using your platform in the best, what's the best way to use your platform, and just somebody else tell you what the best way to use your platform is, right? So like I said, it was tough to watch, but it's important and vital. And for most people, that's the high point of the film, right? Like just that interaction right there is really the climax. And the film doesn't even really level off at that point. It just kind of keeps going until you get to that crescendo at, where Muhammad looks back and tells him to come on out. But it doesn't level off. So it's like seeing that relationship and then hearing the story of him being at the concert. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I see where this is coming from. Right? I can see where this is coming from. And so, but at the same time, knowing at that time, Sam Cooke is one of the most powerful black men in the country. Because he owns his own company, he owns his masters. He's employing other people. He has other people writing, and so it's like if we can have a civil conversation here, I might be willing to join your platform in some way where we can empower our community. Yeah. But now you've cut me so deep. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna just walk out this door.
Yeah, it's that Oh, go ahead, Doc.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, what Alan T was talking about, just that validation, man, from the people that you love, or just from other brothers. That validation for black men is so important. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or indifferent, but it's just so important, and you saw that. And when they was talking about it, especially when when they left the room, and Sam was like, he's like, I know what's going on out there, right? He's like, yeah, you talking about? He said, nah, like I know, right? Because it's this idea of validation that was being sought in that moment. Because again, like this self-fulfilling prophecy, these ideas, like I'm not as in tune as I think I am. Even though I'm talking about economic empowerment and when Judy goes and buy that Rolling Stone album, Bobby Womack getting paid, I'm getting paid, right? And so, but again, that didn't matter because in that moment he needed a validation from his peers, and I know that happens to so many black boys and men. We crave that. We need that.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, Sam Cooke has already been at this point arrested for trying to integrate a lunch counter in Louisiana. He's boycotted shows in Memphis, Atlanta. So he's doing all these things, right? So he's heavily. That's where when we were chatting on, I think Saturday, whatever day that was, Phil. I said the film took some liberties, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's where I'm like, wait a minute. So it gives the appearance that he's not actively engaged, right? Because we get to blowing in the wind, and then a change is going to come, flows, a few months later. But so he's actively engaged. He's just doing it a different way.
Yeah. I think like a lot of artists at that time, and I always tell my students that civil rights movements and these movements, they take money, and so a lot of these artists were doing these shows in places they didn't necessarily want to, and other things, and that money was going right to the movement, man. When I watched it, there was a couple of things that I thought about, like Sam Cooke he's probably been the longest in the entertainment business out of all of them, if we include Cassius and Jim Brown. I think he was, he's 5-6 years old when him and his brother are in, they're in a group together, Christian group. Father's a pastor of the church, man, holding this church. But the interesting thing with Sam, and the narrative is different with him. His father gives him his blessing to cross over into, secular music. That means a lot, right? For your father to say, it's okay, move forward with this thing. You ain't just got to do the sacred music or the music of the church. Well, he has part of that validation. I don't think there's any greater validation that you can get from a healthy relationship with your parents that says, I may not agree with you, but I'm going to support you, not just go ahead and do it. I ain't going to be against you, but I'm going to support you. Malcolm doesn't have that, right? The father relationship that he thinks he has with Elijah has been proven to be false now at this point as well, or is being rented apart. But simultaneously, while you have Jim Brown at the top of his career, with no nod towards retiring at this point, Muhammad is just taking off, and everything looks like it's bright for him. Sam just bombed at the cabana, right? And so then he comes around his homies and they playing the dozens, but Malcolm is cutting deep with it. It's one thing to bomb and your homies is clowning you, but they got your back. Malcolm saying basically middle finger to that nonsense anyway. Why you want to be there anyway? Because remember, the whole argument starts where Sam is like, I'm trying to get back to, I can't go with you to Mecca or Africa, man. I'm trying to
get back to the,
and that kind of throws Malcolm. I'm like, what type of absurdity is that? You should be wanting to go to Africa with us. You know what I mean? But I think, and I'm not suggesting that this is what King was doing, but the way I read part of that was the assurance about the assurance of Sam and about who he was as a person, at least within the film. I don't know who he was, in other spaces, but within the way that he's portrayed in the film, he has an assurance about himself. He's like, I don't even need to be in Beverly Hills. We got Baldwin Hills, and he got a better view. Like, I ain't trying to be white. I just want to be able to put ourselves in a position, something that Malcolm didn't necessarily have in that moment. And he has, but the twins are coming now, right? I think Betty's pregnant with the twins at this point. Maybe. No, they're born later. So there's 3 more kids that's going to come, but Malcolm has an abundance of uncertainty where Sam, at least even with the failure of the Copa, he's like, I'm going back and I'm going to take over that as well. I wonder within the film what tension that created, because Malcolm's our black shining prince, man, but he's made some mistakes and things like that as well, and we can't deny the fact that even as perfect as he is to us, we all have the ability to be envious. He's the oldest, and then he's watching this person, people who are lapping him in terms of other, to a man, I know you got to question some of the decisions you make. Maybe I should have zigged when I zagged, and I could have my own house because the house is being taken away now. I think the NOI is about to evict him. Send him eviction papers later on. All these other things is happening to a man that Betty is telling him, be careful. We don't have no life insurance. All these other things. He ain't got his affairs in order, even for this urgency that he has behind him. I wonder how much of that, in terms of cutting Sam that deep, was to bring Sam down to a level of uncertainty that he was feeling as well, man. Because I've been guilty of that as well. On my worst days, of my homie shining, sometimes, man, you can't be happy for him the same way you would be if you just found $100 too. In other words, you know what I mean? Yeah. You ain't trying to destroy him. You just got the space for them to be all happy and have options right there.
And I also think there's one of the things that I love how they set up was the cost that you have to pay for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I think Malcolm's theme that Regina sets up is him dealing with chauvinism, what men do. Because it seems like Betty is part of his a big part of raising his consciousness to shit or get off the pot in reference to what this honorable Elijah Muhammad is doing. That is also a heartbreaking moment, just like Muhammad Ali. So there's this mirror and this foreshadowing in those two relationships. There's a mirror because Malcolm is breaking Muhammad Ali's heart, but also Elijah has broken Malcolm's heart. You know what I mean? By his sins, you know what I mean? And having to consciously take a stand in his relationship and to his wife. He owes that moment to his wife to step away from that organization. And she makes that very clear. And that puts him in this space that you were just talking about, Dr. Love. That puts him in this space of anger. As calm as he is, he's pissed. He's mad that he has to break off. Even when he sits down in that chair, and that moment when he says, somebody X, his partner who he had raised, maybe they don't want to see it. Maybe they're not ready to see it.
Lewis X.
Lewis X, yeah.
Yeah, if we know
I
who
think
Lewis
that
X
was an
becomes.
internal. Sometimes you speak through somebody else about something you're feeling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he was feeling that. Yeah, I see it. I'm not ready, but I can't love you. I can't say I love you, Betty, and then not do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, when Dr. Love was talking about just this idea of success and being happy for your fellow brother, right? Again, I speak for me. Use I statements. I've been there, right? I'm still there, right? Because again, hip hop isn't. I'm gonna blame hip hop. Hip hop is ingrained in me this idea of competition. Even though it's a whole lot out there for all of us to eat, especially since we're operating in the algorithm silos now, right? We only seeing what somebody, a few people are doing on a daily basis. And so, you do compare yourself. And we know that comparison is the thief of joy. And I believe it was Malcolm, once they got back to the room, who said, and this is one of the, I guess, one of the issues that I have with Jay-Z, right? I have a love-hate relationship with Jigga Man. But I believe it was Malcolm who said successful Negroes do something detrimental to your own people with the promise that you'll make it back up to them. You made it. For the majority who has self-destructive dreams and didn't make it, all they've left behind is a legacy of negativity. Right. And so and that line, I've replayed that about 4 or 5 times to make sure I got every word. Just because I know I personally feel that way when I think about the black elite, right? But in that moment, I can see how it could, ring off as Malcolm hating, right? And like a little bit of Malcolm hate because he doesn't have the success of the others there. He said, Jim Brown said about Sam Cooke, he's the only one that's, not getting a check from a white man. Right? Out of everybody. So we should be celebrating him. But instead, you're not, Malcolm. And again, what's at the root of this? And so, yeah, man, go ahead.
I think that's a deep moment, though, because if we didn't have this, if we functioned like, and this is going to, please forgive me if this is stereotypical or a big generalization, but if we functioned and we were about our money, how people looked at us wouldn't matter because the fight is underground. You know what I mean? You look up and the next thing you know, we amassed $1 trillion. Sam Cooke was making money moves that was really going to give him real power in the real world in terms of economics. And I think that, I don't know if there's a flat answer, but I think that sometimes the Du Bois argument and is in relationship to convincing whiteness of something. We don't have to convince. We just had to play the game sometimes. You know what I mean? Let me just play the game and stack this cash. And before I know it, we can own 92 acres and we can start our own town. You know what I mean? And it's not always a sellout vision. And I'm just wondering, in that theme of that battle between those two ideas, I know they both go hand in hand, but I'm always worried that we get sucked up into not understanding how powerful, not the appearance of economic power is, like a car and a watch, but real economic power. Like, we forget that part. We think that the bling is the economic power, but that's not the real power in terms of being in a capitalistic space, right? Being in a colonialized space. You know what I mean? I just wonder if the Sam Cooks of the world didn't have it right. Not that Malcolm had it wrong, because you got to speak truth to power too, but that didn't really give us power.
Anybody have any thoughts on that? Or we gonna leave Zane out to dry?
I'm thinking. I'm thinking because we know the nation owned Malcolm's house and his car. You know, he never had much money coming in, so his relationship to money, even though the nation has this economic empowerment philosophy, right? Do for self, and it doesn't. That part doesn't seem to appeal to him, right? He's about freedom, right? And so that's where we start to see that the dichotomy between him and where the nation was headed, even further down the road. So it'd be that he just didn't understand Sam's economic platform, because he doesn't have that same type of relationship with money. Like, I don't, right? I'll tell you now, like, money to me is not really that important, right? I can make it, I can spend it. But I have friends who are searching for economic freedom, right? And really chasing after and challenging themselves to get it. I don't have that drive. So could it be Malcolm? I'm just thinking out loud. Could it be Malcolm didn't have that same type of drive in that direction that Sam did, so he didn't understand it, so he didn't respect it?
I think our core belief system are different sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some people fight from a moral, and this was the Nikki Giovanni conversation, right, with James Baldwin. I think some people some people are moved by a core value that this is right and that is wrong, right? The way you treat me is wrong, and the way I want to be treated is right, and I want you to treat me, and that's not wrong, right? But in the game, in the colonialist capitalist game, what do you gain in terms of the way that, and on the chessboard, what do you gain from using that philosophy to win? Like, if that's your core value, you're going to lose every time. Because I'm not going to convince all those people that stormed the Capitol, 75 million people that voted for Trump, of anything. I'm not going to convince them of anything.
Yeah.
But if I own my own shit, and I mean, I'm not posing any new conversation. I'm just saying that's what I think was coming out between the Sam Cooke and Malcolm X debate. You know what I mean? I think that and I think we've done that in the past. You know what I mean? I think we understood it, and we didn't get caught up in what it meant to be this and what it meant to be that. We just knew that we had our own economic stuff, right? You had to do that. And that wasn't an imitation or an assimilation. That was a survival thing that made sense, and that we didn't, I don't know, I might be nostalgic. I might be creating a nostalgia that didn't exist. But I think that Sam Cooke had it right in terms of owning his masters. That was a brilliant, powerful move. Like, yeah. If I'm going to use my intellect, it's going to be not to cut you down or shade you or outthink you in a way that is philosophical, that doesn't really give me independence and freedom. I think that's what I'm trying to say. economic power. When you got money, you get a certain amount of freedom. When Malcolm was locked in by his own philosophy in a way. You know what I mean?
I,
Go ahead, Dr. Love.
I think, man, um, a lot of folk have speculated, like, because Malcolm's 39 when he dies. And there's plenty of speculation, like, where would he have shifted? I mean, and I don't mean like a complete shift away from his ideological ideas, but what Malcolm does have that, to my knowledge, none of the others had, in particular, Sam Cooke. Malcolm's dealing with international black and brown leaders as well that are fighting against the United States in terms of capitalism, American imperialism, imperialism of the West, you know what I mean? So he's, you know, Fidel comes to Harlem, or when Fidel comes to the United Nations, then he comes and does the thing in Harlem where he's invited, he goes and talks to Malcolm a very short time. But at the end of that conversation, Fidel is inviting Malcolm back to Cuba. I think Malcolm he's about to take his second trip to Africa, and he's about to make his high. Malcolm's talking to, he's heavily influenced by Patrice Lumumba, who was assassinated in 61. Malcolm sees that even with the money and the ownership of the masters, all the things that Sam rightly deserves and is working towards, it is still fleeting. And I think that's what he's trying to remind him of. And it's a thing of, if you're going to make the money, at least, Sam, if you have that much control, and I think that's what he's showing them. How much control do you have when you still can't make the songs that you actually want to make to get us free? So because he says, what does this white man from Minnesota, how does he make this music? And nobody knows of him, whatever. But it's number one chart. You can do that too, but you can't because you're black. And you'll lose your audience. That money and all that power that you have from owning your master. What good is your masters if you can't make no money off of it? If the reason you want your masters so you can make money off of them, and employ other folk. But I think what Malcolm has as the elder statesman, is the gift of reflection and experience that these other cats don't have, right? Malcolm, I think those relationships that he's making internationally with folk is very important in terms of, and this is even why he says, listen, I'm Muslim, but that ain't got nothing to do with the work that I'm going. I mean, it is, but the OAAU will be my political organization that I will be working through. You know what I mean? And he starts looking at things even differently. Definitely that last year of his life, when he comes back from his trip the last time. So I think that's the one thing that Malcolm has that is pushing him in terms of trying to push these guys as well. Sam in particular, because Sam is set up the most at this point, right? Economically, as we understand, in terms of economic empowerment and things like that, and to kind of platform other black folk. But I think what Malcolm was trying to tell him is that thing can be snatched away just as quickly, and not that he was prophesying, but we see just how quickly that, all of that is taken away from him.
And I think, real quick, I think the mental freedom is something that is also more valuable in a way. You know what I mean? Because that's, even if you don't have money and you understand that your spirit is greater than your physical condition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's a battle that's worth fighting too. And I think through his rhetorical power that he was trying to achieve that. He was trying to liberate him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what Muhammad was. I actually have Muhammad saying that. It might have been Malcolm. No, I might have written it down wrong. But somebody's telling Sam that he takes his power for granted. Power means a world where we're safe to be ourselves and live life on our own terms, right? And I think it might have been Malcolm who said that to Sam.
Muhammad. Ali said it in the car.
Okay. Yeah. They was in the car coming from the store. All right, so I did have it right. Muhammad said that to him. Again, something profound coming from somebody that's 22. And just with some of the comments from the people, Marla says it was powerful to see black men have these conversations without presence of or pandering to the white gaze. Jamel says this is where we are now. There is more than one way. He says Sam Plan is exactly what Jay-Z and others have done since Hove was brought out. we could have that conversation another day. I encourage everybody, because again, I encourage everybody to go listen to the most recent In Class with Dr. Carr and Karen Hunter. I sent it to Zane at the 2 hour and 13 minute mark. Uh,
Josie.
a woman named Josie comes in, and when I say she tore the ish down, talking about metadata capitalism and how and we just where we are as far as black folk, but she also speaks to the point that you made, Jamel. So again, the 2 hour and 13 minute mark of that conversation. Sharia says maybe it's not either or, but both, and I definitely agree with that sentiment. A part of me thinks we might be too enmeshed into too colonized, for lack of better words, to ever do something different. Maybe again, that's the skeptic of me. Maybe that's the person who was going into the film thinking about the, coming from the glass half full, right? So again, that's something that I have to sit in and truly think about with a lot of these things, because again, I think hence the reason why the film was so beautiful is because it forces conversation, right? It allows for dialogue, a healthy dialogue to take place. I right after that I turned on American Skin, right? And I immediately turned it off within 5 minutes, because even though they both had the theme of white supremacy and what have you, American Skin was just too much for my spirit at where I am in life. And so we got to be mindful about what I'm ingesting, even though the racism, the conversations that white supremacy, colonization that was taking place in One Night in Miami, it was still digestible, right? And I'm sure American Skin, hopefully it's a beautiful film. Hopefully they kill some white. I don't want to say that. I love white people. Damn, I'm in my Sam Cooke bag right now. Forgive me. But again, I just thought this film was amazing, and we could sit and talk about this for another hour, another 2 hours. I want to thank you, brothers, for
Hold
coming.
on, can I
Oh, go ahead,
make
go
one
ahead.
point?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Just about American Skin. It's a huge difference between Spike Lee Presents and a Spike Lee joint.
Mm, mm.
Just so
Word.
folks,
I heard about the end of that thing. A lot of folk loved it up until that point. So I
Yeah.
haven't seen it. I'm gonna get to it at a certain point.
I haven't seen it yet, but folks think it's actually a Spike Lee movie. But
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
Yeah, I stopped drinking, so you know what I
I
mean.
can.
That will help put me in a mood to allow me to watch that, and so I'm just not there, especially with that opening car scene and just where we with the police and just where we are. I can't for my own mental health. Again, I want to thank. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Love.
One thing that I hope some young person pick up one day or we get access to, I would love to see Malcolm's photography, man. I don't know where those negatives are.
Yo,
So many photographs of him with his camera. He was taking pictures like crazy. I hope it's just not up in somebody's storage unit or already got auctioned off. And but I would love for someone um, to investigate that, man. Do the research. It's probably I ain't wishing it is, but it's probably close to impossible now to get that film. But I would love to see what the artistic side of Malcolm and what he was shooting in these things and how he saw the world through those cameras, man. Because he always had a camera with him at a certain point in his life. I would even love for somebody to find out how he picked up those cameras for the first time. Like what was that relationship? I was thinking that also while I was watching that film, man. Just that other part of Malcolm that there's so many other parts about him that we don't know. But I would love for someone 20 years from now to find that photography or something, man, and we get access to the other parts of Malcolm that we don't know.
there's an article in the New York Times.
Yeah, I saw
when
that.
it was. Oh, you see it? Okay.
Yeah. No, but go ahead, brother. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, I'm
man.
saying there was one in the Times. It's a little while ago now, but that talks about photography. So
Yeah.
maybe it's a lead in there somewhere.
yeah. Gabriel in the chat says that Schomburg has a lot,
They
so
have some.
maybe. Yeah, that was something that I got from that. Like But again, to have this quote unquote militant brother, and he out here snapping flicks, you know what I mean? Again,
Well,
undoing this.
that camera wasn't cheap that he had. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But I think the film did a great job of just this idea, and I titled this "One Night in Miami: Reimagining Black Male Masculinity." For those that know me, know I don't even subscribe to the terms masculinity, femininity. We talk about what it takes to be a healthy person, right? But I think this film did a lot by showing the vulnerability of the characters, the flaws, right? Just the various aspects of them, showing the photography aspect. You'll be surprised as young folk out here, even though they might take a pic on their phone. You know what? Getting a can, that's gay, right? Unless I'm doing something, because this idea of being creativity, right? And again, it's unfortunate because we so many of our young folk miss out on tapping into having a higher knowledge of self because of the ideals that masculinity promotes. So yeah, no, I saw that too. I'm like, damn, I wonder what I wonder what these pictures are looking like. So listen, I appreciate y'all, brothers. I'm starving myself. You know, I'm a little lightheaded right now. I've been lightheaded the last 2 hours. But I definitely appreciate you, brothers, for coming out. How can they reach you? Dr. Love, you want to start? I know you got the Coltrane, and we got to have a Coltrane conversation
Oh
at some
man,
point.
the number
Where,
one, brother. Whenever you want to, man.
when
You
I
already
just
know.
said, but you got to understand, I'm just gonna sit in silence, right? Because I let you
Nah,
do
man.
your thing.
Couple of things, man. If I wish we were back in person teaching. I teach a community, and I'm always, part of reparations for me is uh, community should be able to come into classes and learn, whether they registered or not. Unfortunately, with Zoom, if you don't have a CCP account, you can't get into my Zoom classes. But that's always a possibility when we do return. If you bring somebody to campus, I meet you at the front door, bring it to my class. All right, that's the one, man. This idea of Mbongi, school, just these spaces without walls, as the Congo has taught us, right? The community should do that. Two other things. I'm an editor for an online journal. Asking people to go follow this. It's called A Gathering Together. Spearheaded by two great folk, Sister Jam and Brother Josh. They met at Howard, but they started an online journal called A Gathering Together. We'll be actually sending out a call for submission for our spring issue. It's biannual, um, biannual journal, man, for artists and non-academic, but it's outside of the scope of academia, if that makes sense. That's one. And then me and a good homie, Cedric Miles, we just started a very small press company, right? We're putting out our own things right now called Orange Couch Press. Also on Instagram, you can go. We're doing some small publishing, chat books, a couple of zines with the goal of doing some other things. That's Orange Couch Press, which is also on Instagram, man. And you can follow me with the work that I do at the Coltrane Symposium. Unfortunately, because of COVID, last year we had to cancel, but we did it the year before. And we will be fundraising for 2021 in October. We had a great time last year. A day-long symposium, again, community focused at the Church of the Advocate in North Philly, just a day long with just elders who played with Train, who knew Train, and just, was on the panel talking about it, and non-academics, and not against academia in that way, but we need to make things accessible to everyday folk, which is what the music and the art was truly about. And thank you, Brother Phil. I know we just met 2 days ago formally, man, but I appreciate doing your due diligence and checking me out first.
Those background checks.
Matter, brother. I can see both sides over here, man. But thank you for your due diligence, and then send me that okay to come on. But I appreciate what you're doing.
No doubt, man. Anytime. What about you, Al Latif?
Ooh. What was the question?
He hungry too.
I just zoned out for a second.
Yeah, no. How can they follow your work? He waiting for the book to come out, hopefully 2021. You know what I mean?
That's the goal for this year. But work gets in the way. But you can find me on Facebook by my name, LT Farmer. I maintain a website /blog called theworldaccordingtoteeth.com. The number 2, I think. Don't quote me on that. Nope, that's TO. My Instagram is World Accord to with the number 2. So I'm just an everyday type of person. Trying not to use my favorite word right now, but just here every day, just sharing what I learn, what I love, and what I want to learn. I do have some book recommendations for further reading. I don't know if you can see it over my head right now, but there's a book about Sam Cooke called The Dream Boogie by Peter Garlick. There's another book called Between Brothers, which explores Malcolm and Muhammad's relationship. Those two definitely give some insight on things that happened around that evening. But I'm really thankful to be here. We're gonna start the man cave back up too, Phil. We're gonna get that going. We got the married man cave on Monday nights. We starting in February, but just trying to create spaces for people to come together and communicate and congregate and love on one another.
Word.
That's what I try to do.
No doubt, definitely appreciate you. And then we got my favorite professional American Negro dancer, right, Zay. He's not on social media, but you got work on YouTube, right?
Yeah, definitely got work on YouTube. My old handle was the Smoke Lilies and Jade Arts Initiative, and I got a couple films that are about 10 years old now. You can check out At First Sight, and I can never remember the name of the other film. You can start with At First Sight. That's a good film. A dance film. And then I'm associated with the artist John Dow and the other artist named Terrence Gore. So I would push everybody to check those brothers out. I'm working on a project now with John Dow. Hopefully that'll come to fruition in 2024, but there'll be something in the barns hopefully in the next couple of years. With that, working on that project. I'm always working on stuff with Terrence Gore, and I've actually acquired an outdoor space, 941 North 50th Street, that I'm going to be trying to renovate as a outdoor event space, similar to what you got next to Uncle Bobby's out there with Victor in West Philly.
Yeah.
So look out for that.
That's what's up. And as always, I am your host, Phil Roundtree. You can catch me on here when I'm feeling it energetically. I'll say that when I'm feeling it energetically. I learned not to give days anymore, but I will be back tomorrow. I'll be back. Say it again.
Philadelphia, if I didn't say that.
Okay.
My home company. I'm always working with them too. The Philadelphia Dance Company, better known as Philadelphia.
Word. And so you can catch me here. I'll be back tomorrow for sure, January 19th at 7 p.m. I'll be talking the American Psychological Association and the Bush, the BS apology letter that they sent out on Martin Luther King Day, apologizing for their role in perpetuating systemic racism. Apology. So, I may have people with me. I may just be going in solo, but going in is the operative word. So check me out tomorrow on Rhetorically Speaking. Again, definitely appreciate it. And listen, I'm appreciative for everybody that tuned in. Sharia, Jamel, Jamal, Marquita, Zakia, anybody I forgot. Listen, I appreciate you taking the last hour and 47 minutes to sit and listen to little old me and these great individuals. Again, the purpose of this platform is not necessarily for me to talk my ish, but it is for me to talk my ish. But it's to inform, it's to educate, and it's to uplift people that look like us. So until tomorrow, peace.
Peace. Nice meeting y'all.
Thank you. You're not doing the inauguration show? Oh, my bad. Wednesday. Yeah.